Alright, you can't really see my face. It's a bit of a tricky video, this one. I'm shooting straight into the sun, the sunrise going on behind me. It isn't really about the video footage. This is it's like a video podcast, I guess we could say. And what are my podcasts about? Well, you kind of have to watch them to find out. And that's not the way we do these things. My favourite Chewy Uber at the moment is a guy, and he says, the solutions come first, the explanations come next. Okay, so probably two things in this video. One, why we're all becoming attention deficit sufferers. And two, why Microsoft makes the world's worst products. But it's not really a payout on Microsoft so much as business, and how we chase what consumers want, and that becomes a self-fulfilling loop of constantly moving goalposts, constantly changing interfaces, and that's more so to do with business. Arguably, Microsoft and why they're pretty bad. It's paint by numbers and executives that are leading the industry and chase what other people are doing, and therefore constantly moving the goalposts. No consistency in interface or design and the way we do things, and therefore we all become scattered. But case in point, the start of this video. Why are we all attention deficit sufferers? Okay, well that's my 1 minute lead in. Let's get back to the fact that I'm a silhouette. Right, there's a sunrise going on behind me. We're here in Australia. We've got the birds chirping around me. I believe I've set the microphone in a directional manner, so it should pick up my voice. I'm trying to speak quite clearly. If you wish to leave feedback in this video, if you wish to be about my filmmaking skills, you're welcome. I wish we could have better feedback than that, but okay, if it's about video quality and you're not happy with it, you let me know, right? If you want to slow down your life for a moment, if you want to hang out here for a moment, you want to spend a moment with me, you're welcome. So this is going to be a long video. Part of it is as therapy. A lot of the topic is something that we're all suffering from presently, and that is to do with a world that constantly needs to reformat a product to keep us interested in it. Really not that. We're all interested in our products. We're all quite happy to learn them. We'd be all quite happy to keep them. But right now, businesses need to make money, so they're going to force us forward. Usually that comes in the form of firmware updates. That using security updates can cripple the speed of our processes, etc. Goes a step better than that. I think I've been setting up a Windows 11 laptop. Right? I got out of IT. I was an IT guy, person. Back in the 80s, I suppose, I was building front-end interfaces using menus, because the graphical user interface that became Windows was 3.1, somewhere around then. And even Windows I was introduced to, I guess arguably for setting up at other people's houses, mostly. Eventually I played with it, but my background was Mac 84. Well, I made the first ever Mac. Made the mistake of, she worked in a shop that sold them, and bought the run-out model, which had the single-sided floppy drive, so we had to have the external drive to have a double-sided drive, and it was great. You'd put your operating system in one drive, and you'd put your word processor in another drive, and there was consistency in everything you did, and productivity was great, and they had an interface that was what you see is what you get. And recently I was setting up this Windows 11 laptop, and I have an attitude, by the end of this video I'll probably impart in you a similar attitude of, whenever there's an alternative to a Microsoft product, you choose it. But I chose a Windows 11 laptop because the hardware was superlative. I'd done my research. I knew that Apple wasn't getting an OLED screen anytime shortly, and I knew for videos like this that with ideally this video should be in HDR. HDR with me as a silhouette in the background. As I say, sunrise in the background. It's determined to be a long video, as long as I can go for. I've only got 23 minutes or so. I probably didn't need to use this camera, which can record for longer. That's good. It'll be a contained video. As my videos go, this will be a tight one. A tight one. Talking about attention deficit suffering and the way we're becoming that way. Even if our brain chemistry isn't that way, right? Everything in the world currently is designed to constantly break us down, and it's training our brains, training our society to not trust, and have a bunch of other issues, and therefore have our brains operating in a state of play, if you will. Basically always in a mode of trying to reject everything the world's... It's always trying to sell us stuff. And anyway, the process of setting up a Windows 11 laptop, right? I experienced this firsthand, something that I've been refusing to do for years. I've picked up incredible, right? The modern graphical user interface, the modern evolution of Mac 84. Oh, sorry, Win 95. Oh, sorry, Windows 11. And it is the worst. It is the worst front-end interface you could imagine. Mostly because it's trying to be all things to all people, right? And so the particular hardware I've got recently trying to set up was touch screen, and you can turn it to a tablet, you can turn it to a laptop. And it's got that middle-sized screen, so at no point is the interface really entirely sure what it's doing. And of course the hardware itself, you can have any resolution out there, and I'm a little bit tech savvy, so I'm probably more than that, I'm very tech savvy. But I'm aware of where I can sacrifice in a purchase, so I went with what is considered a fairly low resolution screen by today's standards. And what I found is that everything in the design, every single thing in the setup was pretty atrocious, and all designed to break me down and be quite useless overall. But when it came down to a word processor, right, for productivity, I couldn't help but notice that good old Coral Word, the editor suite by a competitor to Microsoft, had been using the same saving file format for 25 years. And of course Microsoft has always used the notion of changing file format extensions as a way to force people into their ecosystem. Right? And that's what businesses do, very unethical tactics to force us into their ecosystem, be it a Bluetooth codec or an adapter or who knows what. There's so many ways that you can just lock your consumers down. So what does it matter? Well, as a society, right, it used to be in the 1930s or so. This is a study, and I wish I could remember this verbatim. It wasn't a study they would have composed in the 1930s because people just didn't think of that method of science-ness when approaching the general public. Psychology as a field didn't exist, arguably, at this stage. The forefathers of psychology, there's a couple of them pushing some inroads. But yeah, look, we didn't know as much as we do now, that's for sure. But what they figured out was that people generally, and it's a bit different between cities and countries, but people generally only had a few significant thoughts a day, right? And that the number of significant thoughts they had over the entire course of a year is equivalent to what we have, well, when the study, this is 20 years old data, it was equivalent to what we're having in a day then. And the problem is now, when we pick up our phone and the way it's designed to be invasive on us and force us to constantly fight it. Now hang on a second, that does depend what ecosystem you are in, right? Because the creatives have learnt to stick with the Apple ecosystem. It doesn't matter what you personally feel about them, right? If you've got a little bit of, if you're a white belt consumer, a yellow belt consumer, you probably think their products are overpriced. Right? Well, I try to experience my products. I try to learn about them right down to the chip level. And I'm not pro any company. And when I look at the Apple hardware, it's superlative, right? And so people look at the resolution of the screen, for example, on an iPad. They go, no, you get better resolution on blah, blah, blah product, right? Okay, well, if you're playing the spec sheet game and if you're playing by the numbers, right, the manufacturers have got you in their pocket. And they really will own your next purchase. The reality is, if you're a company that understates your products, in an Apple product, for example, and I feel like I'm really peaking here, I can't drop my microphone 20 dB or 10 dB now, otherwise everyone at home is just like, he went really silent all of a sudden. Sorry if I'm clipping. Sorry if the birds are too loud for us. But say an Apple iPad, there's attention deficit disorder in full effect. I don't know if I'm a sufferer, but we'll come onto that in a second as a loop. It doesn't really matter about me. The point of this video is not about me. It's about Australian sunrise going on behind us. Maybe just wasting time having an Australian taught, Aussie-like, about technology. But the iPad technology, when you look at it, and this is an iPad, it's a lot of products in the Apple ecosystem. but they usually are quite understated in their subtle differences. And a lot of times competitors don't want to reveal why they're better than the competition. Case in point with an Apple iPad, it comes down to reflectivity of the screen, and it drops fatigue, right? They actually put top quality into the layers that go into it, and it's the same with lenses, right? Right now we're filming on a lens, and a good lens might have certain coatings on certain of the elements. So if you pick up two camera lenses, and if you're only looking at the technical sharpness of those camera lenses, because that's what, as a white belt or a yellow belt consumer that we've learnt, that's what people are reviewing, and that's what you buy into. Now, the problem is chasing spec sheets has killed every single one of my hobbies, right? Audio is gone, like all these things, because they're chasing spec sheet perfection. Things that when people tune by ear, or when people were actually making them as products to suit the purpose they were built for, and we weren't chasing spec sheets, because that's the warfare that when we're internet warriors and we can sit on a chair and we don't actually have any phenomenological existence with the product. We don't touch it, we don't smell it or experience it in any regard. We're just reading cold, hard facts. The cold, hard facts invariably get represented by numbers. And so we learn, right? And because we've probably helped an uncle or a nephew or some, sorry to be gender just specific there. We're probably out there helping family members to do their IT purchases and whatnot. And in that process, we've probably had great success on many occasions. And for a long time there, chasing the spec sheets would often give us the core elements that really mattered. But that's not true anymore. And so case in point, when I went to buy a laptop a couple of days ago, right, and just right, what does a technician like me buy as a laptop? Okay, well, my last laptop was given to me for free by a hock shop nearly 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, right? Given free, right? They saw no value in keeping it. Now the truth was it needed to have Windows reinstalled on it. There was a lot of work that needed to be done, and the price point on it was quite cheap. And it had a Blu-ray drive in it. 8 gig of RAM, I believe, and it did. It had a little solid-state drive, had a really nice keyboard to type on. It was a little 13-inch Sony Vaio. It's probably worth about $4,500 at some point in history. Beautiful little machine. I liked it because it had a physical flick switch for turning the Wi-Fi off, and it had some advanced drive types that I could plug in on the fly into little slots that I could put like a Linux operating system on, and so when I was booting, I could just, either by clicking a drive in or out, I could, it was great. Anyway, everything about it was amazing. That was a free computer, right? And it was a Penryn architecture, I think. It was like the 9900. It was the perfect version of a CPU. It was like 3 gigahertz, probably dual core. But it did everything I needed it to do, arguably. Its battery life at this stage in history probably isn't ideal. Did I need to upgrade it? Absolutely not. It's great for my needs. I could plug HDMI off it. It had a flick switch where I could engage the inbuilt video card, right? An NVIDIA one of all things. If you're playing the spec sheet, the white belt consumer game, you want to buy into an unethical company, there you go, right there. So my new machine, no inbuilt video card necessarily. The one built into the CPU, it's quick enough. It's like 12 cores. It's ridiculous. It's got performance cores and other cores. I want to go into the BIOS and deactivate half of them just out of power efficiency. I don't need that much processing power. Although I might find out. I don't edit my HDR videos. If I did, I'd certainly be using all those cores. And so that was a feature that I was looking at. I really wanted that OLED screen, really wanted the touch screen, really wanted it. It's a Yoga 7i. In the local market, it was less than $1,400, and there was all sorts of other benefits in shop in terms of gift vouchers and stuff I was getting, and I actually used in-store gift vouchers to get it. And amazing device, amazing what you get, and it runs for like 15 hours playing videos or something. Like, it's just got everything, and it included the stylus in the box. There was no additional costs. Was it a bargain? Yes, it was, in my eyes, because you've got to buy above a certain point to get reliability. In terms of branding, there's only a few brands that I trust with reliability. If I was buying by spec sheets, I'd buy a Hewlett-Packard. Not reliable at all. Wouldn't want one to do any productivity on, any typing of documents if I was a student or anything. Right? You don't want to buy by spec sheet. You want to buy by reliability. The one I've got's Mil-Spec. It's got like pretty decent ability to survive in a range of probably temperature variance, a little bit of drop, and just a little bit of rough wear and tear. And it's probably good for a laptop. You can flip around and use it as a tablet. And you're probably going to be a bit rough with it. Put it in little tent mode and stuff. Anyway, Lenovo Yoga 7i or something, I think it was. Brilliant. But it has an HDR screen, very low res, but a 16:10 ratio. Right? And these are the sorts of things that matter in real world usage. And so if you're looking spec sheets, you're going to go, oh, resolution matters. Okay, well, I had a mate that got a 4K screen at the 14-inch mark, and he likes a high-res screen. Works on incredible. He's an actuary, travels around the world, does spreadsheets for people. Needs high-res. Usually turns up in a country, buys another monitor, plugs it in. Sort of an income level that if leaving the country, and if he's got to book luggage, it affects him getting on a plane. There's a lot of times he'll just put a monitor down near a bin at an airport and walk off. He's probably one of these pricks that everyone's like, you can't leave luggage unattended at an airport. He just puts it in the bin, right? Because he did his job, he got his pay, it helped him to do what he needed. He had multiple monitors. And the feedback he gave me as someone who's got an unlimited IT budget, arguably, in terms of business write-offs and tax depreciation, he's bought many of the best laptops, usually for the cache in the processor, because that affects him getting numeracy done. And case in point is a spec sheet warrior, and he's a very intelligent person, probably the most intelligent person at the school, arguably, and never turned up and didn't get the top mark, because didn't turn up as often as the guy that did get the top mark at the school. But fair to say that, you know, he wrote the model off test a few years in a row there, which is pretty impressive. That's the actuary games. A bit of a smart fellow, and he got caught out in spec sheet warfare. He went out and bought an i7 processor that was ultra power efficient, and it was missing the cache. And his old machine was much quicker at doing the work, the math work in these spreadsheets. Right? So me as a consumer, when I went for resolution on a 14-inch screen, knowing that what matters in terms of viewing pictures is colour and contrast, and that you can simulate more curvature and gradations if you've got colour and contrast, I opted for OLED. And I knew my next purchase was going to be Apple. I knew I was going to get a nice, solid, reliable, secure, productive machine. And we can argue, oh, you don't like your interface. No, dudes, you just learnt the world's worst interface, and you put so many hours into learning it that now it's Stockholm syndrome, and you feel captive to it. And if you spend an hour learning the competitor's front end, that remains incredibly consistent and it's incredibly robust, and you don't need to constantly change things, you'd find that, wow, you'd have much success in an Apple ecosystem. But from the research I was doing, Apple wasn't going to get access to OLED for sounds like it could be 2027. Right? They keep trying to say it's just next year. They keep trying to just delay us. Right? They know it's affecting them at a laptop level. I guess they've had it in phone screens for a bit now. But yeah, so I opted for exceptionally low res because my actuary friend had said, man, it's too high. 4K on a 13.3-inch screen or about a 14-inch screen. I just set the resolution to a lesser desktop. So it's basically, it's not what you want. You generally want your LCD screens at native, or these types of technologies. So 16:10 ratio is kind of handy. Sadly, with Windows 11, I can't do the thing I've always done because I want vertical screen height. I want the taskbar off to the side. Win 11, all the configuration stuff is gone. You go to the control panel, I like to go, Win key R, run box, and type in control and hit enter, and that gets you the old school control panel. But Win 11, all the applets in the old school control panel actually just link you to the new Windows control panel. So you're constantly jumping in and out of interfaces and going, white screen, and then you go back to the nice dark interface if that's what you choose. And sadly, you can't have multiple control panel applets open. It's just one, and all the things you need, they're no longer on the machine, because the European Union, right, they're protecting us. They're making it so the companies don't send everything we're doing off as data back home. So Microsoft, being very much within the law, has ripped out your HDR config and ripped out all the applets and things that were in your computer, probably the true type font tuner, whatever, right? They were going to figure out what you're going to use on your computer, right, without sending that data home. They're going to have you volunteer it, right? Because you're going to go on the net and you're going to say, well, you're not. You think you're in the control panel. You think you're hitting a button for tuning your screen, and then it goes to a web page, and then you can download from the Microsoft Store the applets that we used to have included with our operating system. Right? So the operating system gets bigger and bigger every year, and that's just for reliability on Microsoft's side. They keep multiple stacks of the operating system on your drive so that when one invariably gets there's issues with the files or whatever. It's kind of got a backup of its own self. Who knows, right? They're just wasting our drive sizes. I just sound like I'm just really anti-Microsoft. I guess I am, because they're killing every industry they touch. Right? I generally won't let a Microsoft product in my house. I know I've, done a deal with the devil by putting a Windows 11 machine in my house, but I figure with the right software on it, once I've set it up, configured it, I've got this superlative hardware, and I believe in time I'll have a configured experience. Okay, so let's turn this around to why does this matter with attention deficit? Well, in a world where everybody has to resell us, right? There's only so many fat cats, right? There's only so many people with lucrative amounts of money who don't get on a phone and complain when a firmware update or the constant need for manufacturers to push our old hardware into a non-usable state so they can resell it to us. Some people complain. Usually the lower socioeconomic people are willing to waste huge amounts of time doing the complaints, and the manufacturers don't want to deal with them. They want to deal with the people who don't complain when they invalidate their old hardware. So they're getting very clever at the way they deprecate these things. They're getting very clever at figuring out who their customers are they wish to work with. And at one point it's going to become you. Anyway, we constantly need to upgrade. We constantly get forced forward. And we're now volunteering for that at all sorts of levels. It's amazing what they can do in terms of, I think there's some new Windows features. This really blew me away, and it's obvious that you're basically, by choosing it, you're volunteering to have your processor configured down and down and down by spec constantly, such that when you're looking at getting a new machine, so long as it's flavour of the moment and still in the support window, it's going to look a lot more powerful, irrelevant of whether it really is or isn't. And it would have been called battery gate for iDevices a little while ago, but the fact that we now voluntarily opt into it, and just as long as the prose or the language that describes the feature to us always says it's in our favour, and so we take it and we go, yeah, right, the computer's recommending that to me. I haven't done enough research on it, so I'll just say yes to that, right? Now, it is true with regards to some of the battery charging technologies, right? Not what I was talking about just then, but I mentioned battery gate, and it is true that we generally like to keep our batteries charged between 20 and 80%. Right? That's a thing. So it is worth turning some of these features on, right? But because all these machines autopilot, because we lose track of what's going on. And I'll give you a case in point. When I set the Windows 11 machine up, there was about 80, somewhere between 50 and 80 things I had to turn off just to make it my machine and run like any previous PC that I would set up. Basically to make it a lot less invasive, right? But to also make it so it's reliable and controllable. It's not going to constantly reconfigure itself in ways that it shouldn't. Even just down to things like being able to use my HDR on battery, right? Like that was something I really wanted to do. And I was fighting with the computer to be able to do that. Right? And I wanted that. And it's a highly efficient power screen, and I've made the background black. Can't get rid of the bin, right? It's permanently on my desktop. It's a nice white icon. Yeah, I can change its icon, definitely. But it's all work, I don't really want to do that. And in all that fighting with it, and then I do the update, right? And of course, when you do an update, they're going to turn on all the features again that you've just gone to the effort to turn off. And so you're constantly fighting it. You basically need to learn just to use a device, the things that life now requires you to have. All the businesses have figured out they only want to deal with you through the portals where they can break your attention down and win, right? It used to be the big players knew what they were doing, right? You went into a mall that was all over the world, right? And they'd figured out, don't let you have windows into the mall, right? Then you know what time of day it is, and you get a sense of, I've been here a long time, I've got to go home, right? Casino. No clocks, no windows, right? You don't want to give a person a sense of, it's time to go home. And that's the way our devices are built. They're built to constantly distract us now. It's gotten into, if they can sidetrack us long enough, they take the attitude that they might just get us to go through a shop and buy something from them. And the retail salesperson I was buying this laptop from the other day couldn't believe when I said my phone didn't have a calculator on it. And I was pretty pissed because my high-end phone, productivity phone even, didn't have a calculator in it by default, right? The whole reason computers came to market in the first place, basically in the 70s, every business needed calculations. Right? That's what they did. That's what computers are really good at, crunching numbers. And magically, and I'm talking here like flagship productivity device, no calculator. Now, the fellow in the shop had an iteration of the same device, a couple of models on, and he got his out and went, I've got a calculator on mine. And we realised, okay, so must have been a bit of pushback on that one. And they realised, we better give you that. I guess my attitude is with mine, they're just like, we know that if you go to the shop to install this, we can watch what you're doing, and you might, while you're in the shop, buy something else. Now, there is some problems here. I don't want to sound too pro-Apple, but Apple is an ecosystem because they make the hardware and the software, right? They don't have to make money off you in unscrupulous ways. They don't have to force you forward. That's why there's long life on the Apple products. But this constantly changing of tech, and all we need is stability, and this constant need to divert our attention in the hope that they might get a profit of us, is what is training our brains to two things: to constantly be flickering and trusting that's the way that we are productive, whilst at the same time having to have our blinkers up to go, what way are we about to be screwed over? Right? Humanity never was that way. Our significant thoughts were few and far between. We didn't have these things like, the Mabels, the Pattersons next door are getting married. That was a significant thought, right? These things happen in not much through the year, and they were big things, and they mattered to us. But now we got all these big things happening in our life non-stop, and our brain has to take these giant processing moments and just minimise them and try to get a hold of them in a way where it's not revolutionary and pulling the rug out from under us. And we're managing to do that, right? We're managing to autopilot our way through these tricky seas and these tricky oceans, these tricky storms. And we're going, hey, I'm piloting the ship, I'm doing okay, right? And so we're normalising this. We're normalising the constant need to fight and not flight. Anyway, it's time for flight. Be free. Well wishes with you. Have a great day.